Brooks Running has a new shoe for you runners out there. Did you hear that? Better turn up your volume. In fact, turn it up to the max. Introducing the all-new Ghost Max. It's got all kinds of things to make your knees and ankles feel protected, like Max Cushion, Max Soft Landings with DNA Loft V2 foam, and Max Smooth Rides with their Glide Roll Rocker. Feel better on your run with Ghost Max. Learn more at brooksrunning.com.
Join me, 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty, on my podcast, My Life of Crime, as I take on true crime investigations like no other. This season, I'm looking into the labyrinth of crime and secrets within families. I'm cutting straight to the evidence and talking to the people directly involved, including investigators and the families of victims. Listen to My Life of Crime with Erin Moriarty wherever you get your podcasts.
A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
You know, you completely immerse yourself with all of these other people that are on drugs because you don't want to be around normal people. People that are on meth are really weird. One of the things that I wanted to do whenever I was getting sober was I wanted to show people that it could be done. I wanted to be an example. And there's been a couple of people I know that have gotten out of the world and some of my family, but a lot of them are still in it. When you're in jail, it's really easy to think, you know, when I get out, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to get my life together. And then you get out and you don't. It's just the first thing you do is you call one of your friends and then they show up with some drugs.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
This week, we wanted to dive deeper into the meth culture of the area where Molly and Colt went missing, because it's a very big problem, and young people are very vulnerable to drugs. When people are experimenting as teenagers, this is when a drug like meth can take hold. We never want to forget that Molly was a teenager, and Colt was only 21 years old when they went missing.
From the people that we've spoken to in that area, it seems to be a generational problem. Entire families are being ravaged by meth in the rural parts of this country, especially in Oklahoma.
We really want to help our listeners who have been struggling with meth addiction. If you were living this lifestyle, there is a way out. And if you know something about Molly and Colt's disappearance because you were in that world with them, don't be afraid to reach out. It is the first step. There are people who can help you.
So many people have been able to quit meth and move on to the other side. And today we have a very special guest who listened to the podcast and felt compelled to come forward with her story.
We thank her for sharing her experience. She has been to hell and back, and she is an inspiration. When I got your email, I get a lot of emails. We get a lot of emails.
Right.
It just hit me because, for two reasons. One, you're not connected to the case directly, but you did experience a similar type of lifestyle that Molly and some of the people involved in this case were involved in. And I think
yes,
the next level for this podcast is to understand the meth culture and how it affects women and why this could have happened. Because I think the question always is like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And because Molly was involved in that culture, it was a detriment to the case from the beginning, because people kind of turn a blind eye to these types of cases when it's a girl who's missing, who's either on drugs or a prostitute or living a different type of lifestyle than the basic college student.
And also we want to kind of get a perspective from you is what that culture's like, to experience it, and also in general, why do you think it's so pervasive in that particular area of the country? I know drug issues are a problem worldwide, but for some reason in that part of Oklahoma, or even Oklahoma in general, in the Midwest, the methamphetamine problem is so pervasive that it's in every fiber, and people just accept it. And we have this kind of riding wave of people like yourself who have come through the fire, but majority of them don't, and they end up becoming addicts and also just dying early.
Yeah, that's very true. It's a really hard world to get out of. Everyone that you know, well, all of your friends and family you had before you're on drugs that are not included in that world are kind of lost to you. You know, you completely immerse yourself with all of these other people that are on drugs because You don't want to be around normal people. People that are on meth are really weird. They have some weird mannerisms and do like really jerky arm movements and stuff when they're really high. It's really easy to spot. But when you're in that world, everything that you're doing is to get drugs. And you're somewhere in the cycle of getting drugs, being on drugs, getting more. You know, you get off of them a little bit, maybe for a couple of days. But when I was really doing meth, for about a year and a half, I stayed up for 5 days at a time.
Oh my God.
And during that time, I never paid for meth. I did meth for about 4 or 5 years, and I not one time ever paid for it. People just gave it to me. The men in that world keep women strung out, and it's a way to control people. You know, drugs are on their way, so you don't want to leave where you're at, and the women are put in really dangerous situations. One time I went to a hotel room with a lady that I trusted, and I almost got sold into sex trafficking. They sent a goon, or they had a goon come to pick me up. And a goon is just a thug that will do whatever. But I did some really fast talking, and I made this guy like me. And he ended up walking me home. I was in a vehicle once. I went with a friend of mine to go pick up his phone from a place. While I was sitting in the van waiting for him to come back, 2 girls came out and jumped in. One got in the seat behind me, grabbed the knife that I had in my bra and held it to my throat. I think that they were going to kill me. And I did a lot of fast talking again. And they ended up just dropping me off in the middle of nowhere. My friend ended up chained up in that house. And I went to some people that I knew that were in the, and they got a group of people together and went and got him out of the house. There's a lot of different things like that happen. And you put yourself, so a lot of people on meth end up in hotel rooms. You just kind of, nobody has a home. You kind of hotel hop from one to the other, and you never really know what's going to be going on in that hotel room. I did get put in some situations that I had to do things that I felt like I had to do to keep myself safe. I also wore headphones a lot, and I think that saved me from being hurt at least once, because I had my headphones in, but my music wasn't on. And these 2 guys that were in this hotel room with me were talking about putting someone in a hole with their head sticking out. I don't know if that really happened, or if maybe they were trying to see if I could hear them and, get upset or scared or whatever. But I did a lot of pretending that things were okay.
Let me just stop you let me stop you for a second, because I just want to kind of get a little bit more background yourself. Do you mind obviously telling us a little bit about yourself and what was your first experience with meth, and kind of describe for the public, because obviously a lot of people haven't done meth before, and then what is the attraction? Explain the experience of being on meth.
The way that I got into meth was actually with an opiate addiction. In 2008, I went to a pain management doctor that gave me a ton of pills, and he actually ended up being prosecuted for it. And he was like the kingpin in Oklahoma City that was dishing out all of these opiates. Well, when you can't get them anymore, the withdrawals are horrible, and meth helps stop those. You don't feel so bad. If you're sick, meth gets rid of it. You don't feel sick anymore. It gives you a boost of energy. It also makes people very sexual. So you're a lot more willing to have sex with people that you wouldn't normally have anything to do with. And then there's pressure from people also. So, staying up for 5 days at a time, people tend to get really weird too. Whenever you come down from meth, you feel really horrible. So you want to do something to feel better. So you do another opiate, then you're going through withdrawals, then you do meth. It was just kind of a really vicious cycle. And it's hard to stop because you feel like crap all the time. I mean, the only time you really feel good is right after you do some drugs. And I had ended up shooting up 5 to 10 times a day. I was a person that didn't like needles. I got talked into it one time, and it was the worst thing I ever did.
How old were you when you first did the meth?
Well, I'm 49, and let's see, that was probably around 2011. So about 11 years ago, so 30 something. I never got in any kind of legal trouble or anything until I was 40 years old. and I ended up with 2 felonies. Because you're pretty much willing to do whatever to get your drugs. So one of my felonies is for trying to fill a fake prescription for OxyContin. And a lot of my friends and family were all in this filling fake prescription cycle. And meth was just right there with it. I have 2 stepsisters that have been on meth for at least the last 10 years. And between them, they've had 4 kids born on drugs. And one of my sisters has 5 children, and she's lost custody of all of them. She has court next week where she's probably going to lose her parental rights. My life was, I was homeless. I had my 14-year-old daughter, but she was staying with friends for the summer, and I was on the run from my bounty hunter. She found me and took me to jail, and it changed my life. While I was in jail, my daughter tried to kill herself twice.
No.
And it's the worst, most horrible feeling you can have. I was so helpless. My sister ended up taking custody of her for me, and I cried myself to sleep. And I cried like all night. And then the next morning I woke up and I had this knowledge. I was told that God and the universe want good things for us and from us. And everything that happens in our life is to direct our path, help us grow or learn so that we can become who we're supposed to be. And that everything with my daughter was going to be okay. And it was going to be better than it ever had been. I had this calm and peace. And I really feel like that knowledge came from God. I don't think that I could have done what I did to get clean if I didn't have God's help. But after I got out of jail, I was not perfect. I went to a rehab and got kicked out for sharing my medication with someone. Then I went to an outpatient rehab. For about 9 months, my daughter wouldn't talk to me at all. I was really frustrated. It was kind of hard to stay clean during that time because she wouldn't see me, and DHS wouldn't make her because they were afraid the stress would make her try to commit suicide again. But I had this knowledge that was given to me that everything was going to work out. So I stuck with it. And I was very lucky. My aunt let me hide at her house. That's how I feel. It was away from the city. I didn't know anyone in that area. I started focusing on all the positive things. So I set an alarm on my phone and went and watched the sunset every day. I started meditating. I listened to a lot of music. I made myself a playlist of 150 songs that were just my happy songs. Didn't remind me of anyone or anything, just made me happy. And I would sit in my aunt's backyard and sing at the top of my lungs, and I'm not good at it. So I'm sure I disturbed her neighbors, but it was very therapeutic for me. And I think it helped get a lot of negative feelings out of me. If I hadn't had my aunt's house to go hide at, I don't know how I would have gotten clean, because all I really knew were all these people in the meth world, and wanting to do drugs all the time to feel better just kind of keeps you locked in it. So there was a day that I had a pile of meth. I put it in my hand and I blew it off into the wind. And I was so proud of myself. I went and looked in the mirror and I said, "I'm proud of you." And I felt really silly the first time that I did it. But then I made myself say it again, and I just busted out bawling because I was really proud of myself. So every time that I did something that I was proud of myself about, I made sure I told myself, and I held on to that feeling, and I would go look myself in the mirror, and it really helped grow something positive in me. My whole outlook on life changed. I used to think, something bad's fixing to happen constantly. Now I know that whenever anything happens that's hard, it's really just to direct my path, or something else is meant for me.
How long have you been sober?
6 years in February. So
Wow.
Next month it'll be 6 years.
Good for you. It sounds like you've been through a lot, and I can hear in your voice how difficult it is to talk about this. So thank you for talking about it.
No problem.
But I think that it's important to talk about it because Molly and Colt, they were both deep into this world at a very young age. And a lot of the people that know what happened are in this world. And a lot of them have come out of it like yourself, and a lot of them are still in it. I think it's really helpful to hear from yourself stories like this because it gives them hope that they can get out too. When you first heard the
Exactly.
podcast, what did you think about it?
I instantly was sucked into the whole story. And I don't really know why I had such a connection with it and why it affected me emotionally so much. The way I got into listening to the podcast was my son recommended it to me. My son lives in Lone Grove, and I didn't know until after I listened to the podcast that he actually knew Con. He went to school with him, a small-time troublemaker and known to drink and run from the cops, but he personally did not like him. And then I also found out that my son's wife is one of Colt's cousins. I kind of felt like with listening to the podcast that could have been me. That so easily could have been me. I could have been the person tied to the tree. I can feel how scared she was and what she went through. No one should have to go through that, especially a 17-year-old child.
Were you ever in a situation where you thought it could have gone and likely Molly went through?
Definitely. Yes, for sure. Like I said, the two girls that basically they kidnapped me in a van. I was really scared for my life with that one. And they let me out in the middle of nowhere. And I called my mom. It's in the middle of the night. I didn't know where I was. I have really bad vision. And since then, I've gotten some contacts that are really good. I have a rare eye condition where I really couldn't see. So it was hard for me to even walk up to a street sign and be able to tell my mom where I was. But the whole time I was waiting for my mom to get me, I was walking around. I was hiding behind things. Every time a car would come by, I thought it was them coming back to get me. And with the people that almost sold me into sex trafficking, that was definitely a scary situation as well. I really feel like if I hadn't made that guy like me, I don't know where I would have ended up. And I'm sure that there were more situations like that I was in, but I don't remember all of them all that well. My memory is not as good as it used to be since I was on meth. It changed the way I think and how quickly I can process things and say words. But yeah, I was definitely scared a lot of times. I know that the people that I was dealing with were dangerous people. I know that they would rob you blind and beat people up on a regular basis. It was really easy to get on somebody's bad side. So you had to be really careful. And it seems like the men condition the women to accept what they're doing. I don't know really how to explain it.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that's
Yeah.
important, because I think that we've heard that before. We've heard that, and we've gotten posts from other people explaining
Yeah.
that exact same thing. And for our audience, if there's any way you can kind of maybe just anecdotally kind of give an example of a situation that you were in, or how you heard or you witnessed.
It is kind of like people are brainwashed. I don't really know how to explain it. It's like there is a constant pressure for you to do things that will keep you in that world. So I really don't like this story, but there was a time that a girl that I knew, she told me I could make some money. And it was actually on my daughter's birthday, and I really wanted to be able to give her something. So I went to this hotel. I don't recall exactly what was supposed to happen and how much money I was supposed to get, but I ended up getting left alone in this hotel room with a guy, and I was not going to be able to get out of that hotel room unless I did something sexual with him so that I could be able to leave. Things like that happened several times. You kind of live in a constant state of fear, even though these people are supposed to be quote unquote your friends and the people that you do everything with and for. And the men will send women on missions that could get them in legal trouble, or where, they're dealing with dangerous people. I've purchased fake drugs from someone before and tried to, confront them about it. And they really scared me. Like 3 really big guys came out to the car to talk to me, and I ended up getting out of there really fast. But almost every day that I was doing meth, I was putting myself in a situation where I could go to jail every single day with the people that I was with, or what I was doing, or the drugs that I was holding. A lot of the women in this world get sent on missions like to go deliver drugs for the guys, which you never really know who you're going to be selling drugs to.
Were you ever, you didn't even care what they were giving you, correct?
No.
At that point, you're not even sure what you're putting in your body. It could be anything.
Yes. And I did stay with a guy for a while that he was really scary. I felt like I didn't have anywhere to go, though. But he was always joking about wanting to chain me up in his attic. I really feel like that guy, whenever I thought I was shooting up meth, I don't know what I was given, but it would knock me out. And whenever I woke up, I felt like I had been used. I would be so sore, like everywhere. It was really crazy. I wouldn't remember anything, but I know I didn't go to bed feeling that way. And I'm supposed to be doing meth. It shouldn't knock me out. So I'm not sure what that guy was giving me. Now, he ended up hitting me one day, and that I grew up in a violent home. I will not put up with being hit. So I took off on foot. My mom was kind of fed up with dealing with me. There was a time that she picked me up. I told her I needed a place to go. She said I couldn't go to her house again. She was like, "Where do you want me to drop you off?" And I was like, "Just drop me off at that tree right there." Because, I don't have anywhere to go. You have to find somebody that has a hotel room that you can stay in for a day.
So you're basically living moment to moment.
Yes.
I want you to also explain to us, you talked about being awake for 5 days. How do you stay awake for 5 days?
And what does that do to you? What kind of you can't make any kind of decisions after 5 days of no sleep.
Yeah, and all your decisions are related to, getting drugs, doing drugs, who has drugs, who can I hang out with that has drugs. But it really takes a toll on your body physically, because when you do meth and you're up for 5 days like that, you keep going, you keep moving, you keep doing things, just whatever. Like one time I organized my room every day for a month. I touched every single thing in my room and rearranged everything. Like I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have a job. I didn't do normal things.
So you're like in a state of, you're like manic. You're just...
Yes, exactly. And you really just can't slow down. I have physical issues. So I was in a car wreck when I was 20. I've had back surgery in 2011, and I have fibromyalgia. So there were times that being up for all of those days put me in a huge amount of pain. And the people around me didn't understand it. They thought that I was faking it. But there were times I was crawling on the floor, bawling my head off because I hurt so bad, and there was nothing I could do to make it stop. And the only thing you could do to make it stop is more drugs. I would want to go to sleep after like 3 days, and somebody would show up and be like, "Here you go." It was kind of crazy to have that much drugs given to me that I never paid for. I paid for the drugs with me, like with myself, with my body.
It seems to be the how all these women in this world have endured things. It seems to be that they end up in situations where they're tied up, put into a cage, tied to a tree. It's really disturbing. It's
almost like a indentured servitude that this drug controls your body, and you really don't care about anything else but the drug, and you'll do, like you said, whatever you need to do in order to get the drug.
Yes.
How do you survive? Like, what's your day? I know you talked about a little bit about this, but people that you've been around, obviously right now, you're a success story. You've come on to the other side, and how you have to keep it at bay, and if you have any friends who haven't made it.
I definitely have friends that haven't made it. One of the things that I wanted to do whenever I was getting sober was I wanted to show people that it could be done. I wanted to be an example. And there's been a couple of people I know that have gotten out of the world, and some of my family, but a lot of them are still in it. And I've cut myself off from those people. For a while, I tried to be positive and encouraging and uplifting, that you can get off drugs or whatever, and be supportive. But so much of it is just words into the wind. People wouldn't really change anything. And I got frustrated with trying to help people over and over and over, like my stepsister, that just would not change anything that they were doing. So I kind of gave up on them. every now and then I will reach out to someone and try to provide parts of my story or part of my positive attitude, hoping that it would help them. But most of the people, I would say at least probably 3/4 of the people that I knew in that world are still in it. And honestly, I don't know how they're still alive. I did small amounts of drugs. I had this warped thinking that I wasn't as much of a drug addict as everyone else because I would do 10 cents worth of meth and other people were doing 30 or 50, doing really big shots. I wanted to do the smallest amount that I could do and get the effects from it. And so I really just thought, I'm a minimalist and I'm not as bad as you, but I was just as bad as everyone else.
One of the things that people describe to us, both from the legal profession and from in general, we have two thoughts here. Some say that the people that were involved in this murder, they wouldn't have gone to great lengths to hide and cover up the killings. And then we have other people say that, you're dealing with a bunch of meth heads. They're highly motivated and they're high all the time. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can imagine the flurry of activity that happened around that situation because no one's thinking straight. No one knows the right thing to do. I just can imagine how scary that was. And for some of the people that were there that know things that weren't really involved or didn't want to be, like the witness that y'all spoke with on episode 11. It sounds like he did not want to be involved. I don't know, if he was tied to a tree or not, but I feel like even if he wasn't tied to the tree, he felt like his hands were tied. And if someone would have tried to step up and do something, they would just end up in the same situation that Molly was. What was the other part of your question?
Oh, no, I was going to say, so you're basically saying that the decision-making process when you're high in meth, there's no thought, it's just reaction, and it's usually out of desperation.
Yes, and your thoughts are all over the place. So it would be difficult to figure out exactly what to do, but you've got all these people that are high on meth up all night trying to figure out what to do, and there's no telling what they actually did. Well, I guess at some point somebody might tell what actually happened. I just feel like it's a really horrible situation, and if what it's been described happened to Molly, that's horrible. It's truly horrible. I kind of feel like if they did this with these two people, who else could they have done something like that to? I kind of feel like there's a possibility that the different places dogs have hit, there could be more people out there.
Yeah.
They sound like people that had no conscience. So, or a lot of them didn't, and only cared about protecting their family. It was pretty cut and dry with me. I got thrown in jail basically for warrants. I got 2 charges, one for filling the fake prescription, one for using a stolen credit card. And every time it was in Oklahoma County and Canadian County. So every time I would go to jail for one charge, the other county would pull me over there after I went. I was in jail for about 3 months at a time, about 8 times. And honestly, there was a time that I was accused of snitching. I guess I got out of jail too quick. People thought I snitched and I had to be on the run for a while. A friend of mine, and we just lived in his car for a couple of weeks. But whenever I would go to jail, I would go from one county to the other. I'd be locked up for about 3 months. 4th husband went to prison also with 17 felonies. I'd never known a liar, not like them. At that time, I was very naive about these things. So my daughter's 21. So it was 21 years ago. I was in my late 20s. I got pregnant fairly quickly after we got together. So I was not using drugs for 3 years. I nursed my daughter for 1.5 years. My grandfather died and I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. And I went through a really horrible depression. And her dad started giving me Coke to get me out of bed. And since he had been a cokehead for so long, he got to where he couldn't snort it anymore. So I got online and I learned how to cook it, and I got on crack, and that was really horrible too. I was on crack for about 1.5 years, and there were some concerning comments that my daughter made about her father. And my sister called me and told me, and I left. And that's how I was able to get off crack. I just left. I left that world. I left that person. I went and stayed with my mom that was very far away from where we were using and everything. We had a brand new, beautiful home in Moore. I had a really nice minivan that cost $30,000. We could pretty much go and buy anything that we wanted anytime, and we lost everything in a year and a half. We went from having that house to living in a house that had no electricity, gas, or water. And luckily, that only lasted for about a week. And then as soon as I heard that my daughter had made some comments about him, it's like a switch was flipped in me, and I was done.
Brooks Running has a new shoe for you runners out there. Did you hear that? Better turn up your volume. In fact, turn it up to the max. Introducing the all-new Ghost Max. It's got all kinds of things to make your knees and ankles feel protected, like Max Cushion, Max Soft Landings with DNA Loft V2 foam, and Max Smooth Rides with their Glide Roll Rocker. Feel better on your run with Ghost Max. Learn more at brooksrunning.com.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
And then I was going to AA and ran into my fourth husband.
Wow.
It's very similar. I mean, the trigger point for Molly was when her grandmother died, and that was like her whole world had just evaporated with that loss. And a lot of people have said that was when things kind of turned for her, because I feel like there's always this entry point where you're weak or you're vulnerable, and these other people can sense it, and you get sucked away into this world. And people need to be really cautious and pay attention to loved ones and friends who are suffering and need more support during those dark times, so they don't fall victim to these predators. I think it's interesting that you reached out to us and that there is a connection to both Con and Colt. Your daughter-in-law, has she ever mentioned anything about the family's reaction to what happened to Colt?
No, we don't talk a lot. I live out in the middle of nowhere on a farm, and I'm about 2.5 to 3 hours away from them. So I don't get to see them very often, but I was really surprised to hear that she's a cousin of Colt. I don't think that they were close. Mm-hmm. And my son said that he did not know Molly or Colt. So, I think it's just kind of like some extended family that don't really interact.
It seems to be the case in a lot of this whole situation. It seems like there's everybody's 1 degree of separation at some point.
Why do you think it's so big in Oklahoma? I mean, since we've tapped into this, like since 2018, we knew meth was a big problem, and especially in the heartland, in the agricultural communities. Why specifically Oklahoma? Oklahoma seems that it really has a stranglehold on individuals there, and it seems so widespread. That you have these tiny little towns which are just idyllic and seem very calm and serene, and then you look at the underbelly and you start hearing about this. And there's a lot of great people down there. We've heard horrible stories like your own, where people who had normal lives and they kind of waded into this world just a little bit at a time, and then it slowly crushes their lives and sometimes swallows them whole. So why do you think it happens there?
Really, my first instinct about that question would be to say the guys that are in the think that it's really super cool. My last husband, when he got out of prison, he had a tattoo on his hand, and we ended up getting divorced. We never really got back together after he got out of prison, but we tried for a minute, and he told me I had to get tattooed on me that was visible. And no, I'm not doing that. I'm not a part of that. But those guys, they're just straight thugs. They're out to steal people, and they don't care who they hurt in the past. And they use everyone that they can. And it seems like women are just more vulnerable to that. Women are not as strong as men. You can't fight a man very effectively. It's really difficult. Even the scrawniest, skinniest guy, their muscles are just different. It's really hard to fight them. And I learned that early on. It was a lot easier to go along with whatever than it was to fight them. I do believe a lot of people get on drugs because of something emotional that they don't know how to deal with. And I know, Oklahoma's being investigated right now for how they deal with mental health issues. And I'm probably 90% of the people on meth have some mental health issues. And it may be kind of situational, where something happened like with my grandpa or Molly's grandma that triggers that. And then when you have that pain and you're on drugs, you don't really deal with it, but it's always there and it rears up at you all the time. And so to keep that stuff at bay, you do more meth. It really turns off your emotions. So you're not sad anymore. And I mean, it's powerful enough that it can get rid of a sickness that you have. One time that I went to jail, I was so super sick. I don't know what was wrong with me, but when I got out, I was just burning up with fever and stuff. And my boyfriend at the time gave me a shot of meth, and I was still feeling bad. He gave me another one. He gave me like 3. And by the time he got done with that, I felt normal again. And that's kind of, your normal becomes different for someone on drugs. And the whole way you think about things and what you're willing to do is just different. That person of me that was on those drugs was a different person. I can't even recognize that person anymore. I didn't complete my college degree, but I've been an elementary school substitute and a teacher's assistant. I've worked in Head Start. I've had foster kids. I've led a really normal life, and then just, things happened and snowballed and took me way off in left field. And luckily I've been able to pull myself back. But it is hard. I mean, I still think about drugs. It pops up every now and then, and I'm 49, so I've been gaining weight. The easiest way I know to lose weight is to do some meth. I also know where that would lead me. So of course, I'm not going to do any. I've had a lot of miracles that happened in my life since I started getting clean. And one of those is that I've been able to be in the delivery room when all 3 of my grandchildren were born. Oh. If I had still been on drugs, neither one of my children would have let me be in the delivery room. That's a huge blessing for me. But when you start living your life right and your intentions are true, things start falling into place for you. One thing that I had happen, I got a job living at my aunt's that was 3 blocks away so that I could walk to work and she wouldn't have to drive me and stuff. And I actually ended up getting a free bike from a church so that I could, didn't have to put her out more than I had to. While I was working at Del Rancho, a customer came in and she was wanting to use our Wi-Fi. Well, we didn't have Wi-Fi, but I told her she could use my hotspot. The password to my hotspot was love one another. So she asked me if I was Christian, and I said yes. And it sparked a conversation where I ended up telling her what was going on in my life. And I said, next, God's going to send me a car. And it was really like I would think about something that I needed, and the next day, somehow I would get 2 of it, just whatever it was. It was kind of creepy.
You were clean at this point?
Yes, I was. So I told her God was going to send me a car. And she said, well, let me show you something. And she pulls up a Facebook post where she had just posted her daughter's car on Facebook to sell for $5,100. Well, my very first husband had given me $2,000 to help me out so that I could get a car. And I really wasn't planning on spending any more than that. All of my extra money was going into getting all of my legal issues fixed. So I really didn't want to make car payments or anything, but she said, well, just come look at it. Just come look at it. So I go look at it. It's a really cute 2008 Nissan Altima. And we go on a test drive, and she was like, well, do you like it? And I said, well, yeah, I really like it. I hadn't had a car for years, probably 6 years. She said, well, I talked to my husband and we're going to lower the price for you. And how much do you think you can afford a month? And you can pay it off, however long it takes. So I gave her the $2,000. I made a couple of payments on it. And there was another older couple that would come into Del Rancho that I kept updated on what was going on in my life. And they were very caring and supportive. When my daughter and I first moved into our apartment, they wanted to help us out with some utilities or rent or whatever. But I had just gotten the place, so I didn't have any utility bills or anything. So they paid off my car for me.
Wow.
I ended up only paying $501 for that car. And the engine went out on it and I had to sell it not too long ago. But that was my God car.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. I think it really illustrates the power of intention, and when you really put your mind to it, especially when you're clear thinking, and that's an amazing story. I want to touch on one last thing because I think it's super important, because we've talked about this with law enforcement as well. What's it like being through the sausage grinder of the legal system as a meth addict, and how do you see how that kind of continues that rotating wheel of going in and out of the system, and is throwing people in jail for drug addiction the right thing to do in your mind?
It's definitely not. It's not helping anyone. What happened with me and my daughter, if my daughter hadn't tried to kill herself while I was in jail, I don't know that would have been, one of the last times I was in jail. Going to jail puts you where, you hate law enforcement. You don't have anything to do with them. You don't want to go to a gas station and have to talk to somebody that's not on drugs. You definitely don't want to have to deal with law enforcement at all in any kind of way. So going to jail just makes you want to push against that more. You want to rebel from them even more and be able to get away with things that they're not catching you for. The whole process of going to jail is a completely miserable experience. The food is terrible. I've been to Oklahoma County Jail. In there, I was in a room that was meant for one person, but there was 3 of us, and it was in the middle of summer, and it was super hot. Canadian County Jail houses or housed people in Pottawatomie County, and that was the coldest place on earth. They kept it so freezing. Canadian Jail also keeps their facility really cold, and you can't walk around with your blanket wrapped around you. And like I said, the food is terrible. You gain a lot of weight when you're in jail because they feed you really bad food, but it's all carbohydrates. And then you're just sitting there. And when you're in jail, it's really easy to think, when I get out, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to get my life together. And then you get out and you don't. It's just the first thing you do is you call one of your friends, and then they show up with some drugs.
I know a lot of jails, and you can speak to this more personally, offer obviously drug treatment programs while you're in there. But I don't know if I know that's in prison. Do you get that same kind of services in like an Oklahoma City jail as well?
Absolutely not. Absolutely zero experience like that. Now, Canadian County Jail, when I was there was a lady that came in there and taught some drug and alcohol classes. And I had run into her a couple of times in jail. Well, she worked at a Walmart in Yukon. My aunt took me to Walmart and I ran into her. She remembered me. In these things, I'm very active about, and I speak up and I'll talk when, other people won't. Anyway, I started going to those drug and alcohol classes at her church and started going to church with her. That was one of the things that I did while I was waiting to get into rehab and do different things that DHS was wanting me to. I was just kind of in a holding pattern, but I wanted to do everything that I could and more to get my daughter back and prove to her that she was worth it, try to prevent her from killing herself again. I knew she needed one of her parents to step up and do that, and I knew her dad wasn't going to do it.
Well, you at least internalized a goal for yourself. Most people that are in this world, and I'm sure you can speak to it, don't have that. And so can you speak to that a little bit about the ones, and like if you did not have your daughter to kind of use as a goal, where do you think you would be now?
I probably would still be in that world, or honestly probably dead by now.
Tell us what you're doing now, and tell us all the good things that are happening to you because of your being clean, and tell us where you are now.
Like I said, I'm living on a farm in the middle of nowhere. We've got 4 horses and 6 chickens and 3 dogs and 2 cats. I drive an hour to work every day in Oklahoma City. I made the decision to do that because I really love being out here. It's so calm and peaceful, and I love walking around out here in the woods. I have the job at Del Rancho. I got a better job at a law firm. I now have a job at a cell phone company, and I really love my job. I feel like each one has been a step up, and each one of them I've been so grateful that people gave me a chance. So the job that I'm in now, they're very strict about who they hire. They denied me at first, and I kept calling them. I did an appeal. I got 11 letters of recommendation in 2 days and sent to them to try to prove to them that I'm not the person that got those felonies, and they gave me a chance.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I mean, what you've done with your life is such an inspiration, and I think it's one of the reasons why you were meant to be on this podcast, because Molly and Colt and all of the people that know what happened to them were in this world one way or another. And a big problem also is the generational meth use. The parents are using it. The children are using it. The aunts and uncles are using it. So some people feel like they don't really have any options. And they do have options. There are options. There is a better life out there. And some of these people who know what happened to Molly, and Colt are living in fear and can't come forward and can't say what happened because of this fear of this world. But you're a perfect
I completely understand it. Yeah. That fear is very real. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It sounds horrifying. And you're a good example of someone who was able to pull themselves out of it.
And then what's interesting that's been happening with us is that people who were in that world, just like you are, who have come on the other side and have made something of their lives and now are living fulfilling, loving lives, the podcast has jarred their memory, realizing, I need to say it. We had so many people come out to us to the podcast and like on our website telling us, listen, I was in that world. I'm no longer in that world. I don't even live in the area anymore. And I heard something, and now I should have said something then, but I was so caught up in that world, but now I need to say something now. What can you say to them? Because here is what we still have a case of two young people who are missing, and we pretty much presume dead. What can you tell those people if they have information and they've struggled with you? How can you get them to call to action to kind of help if they know something?
I just think that it's really important to speak up. And when you're speaking up for Molly and Colt, you're also speaking up for yourself and saying that the things that you went through in that world were not right and they need to not happen to someone else. And the best way that people that know something can try to help prevent something else from happening to someone else is to speak up and get this stopped.
Well, the BIA, we do believe is the right agency to be handling this and is going to get answers. We are confident in them and their drive to find answers.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you talking to us. We definitely, like I said, Cindy said before, I think it's important that the BIA is involved. They can kind of take more of like a 10,000-foot view of this case, and we've been filtering information to them and tips as we get them, and we hope that our listeners in the local area, if you know something and you think you can contribute to this case in any way, at the end of our podcast, we put all the information on how to contact the BIA directly and anonymously. And if you feel like you want to come to us first, you're more than happy. We'll get that information to them as well. But we really appreciate exposing your life to us to kind of give people a perspective that most people don't have. We've been hearing about it, covering this case for years, but I don't think people really understand the stranglehold this drug has on average, normal people, good, God-fearing people, and what it does to destroy their lives, and how the judicial system is still struggling with how to handle this. Is it illegal? It's illegal, yes. Do you punish these people? No, you don't punish them. You treat them. And I think that's when you start getting into the idea where you can kind of tackle a problem. You don't see them as inmates. You see them as patients to treat this. And I think that's where it needs to go.
And almost every person that I was in jail with was there for drugs. I would say at least 95% of them. And most of it was meth.
And when they got out, would most of them go right back to meth?
Yes, ma'am. They sure would.
And this is the problem. This is the problem.
Most of the times I did too. I got out of jail. I went right back to it too.
This is the problem. It doesn't solve anything.
No, it doesn't.
But again, thank you again for sharing your story. It means a lot to a lot of people and to us.
You're so welcome.
And
Thank you.
We commend you for.
I just wanted to say, there's hope. There is hope. If you have a family member that's on drugs, they may not always be that way. There is hope. And it's hard, I think, for people, family members to see the other people that are on drugs and be able to give them a chance, like my aunt did, to give them a place to stay. But in order for these people to get clean, they need a place to go.
Thank you.
God bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And you too as well.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
In the coming weeks, we have some exciting things happening. We have received dozens of requests from our audience to speak to the corruption in the county. We have heard dozens of stories of how people have suffered because of these abuses of power by elected officials.
We're going to be discussing some of these stories with locals and experts to help initiate some changes in the community. We're also going to create an open forum on the podcast.
We're going to have an episode that is completely interactive. We want to hear from you. What are your questions or thoughts on the case? What would you like to discuss with us? And do you have any information to share?
Please submit your questions or comments with your phone number on the website if you would like to be on the podcast or you would like us to discuss your question or comment.
You can submit this information confidentially directly on the podcast at the bottom of the first page where it says contact.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Partners in True Crime is launching an exciting new podcast, The Killing Hour with Doc Bond. Famous criminologist and author Dr. Scott Bond will be joining Rob and I on a deep dive into true crime and serial killers. It'll be an exploration into the mind of one of the world's most notorious serial killers, Dennis Rader, aka BTK.
We will be joined by special guests featuring BTK's daughter, BTK's prison guard, New York Times best-selling author and Emmy-winning filmmaker Mark Olshaker, the creator of Mindhunters, and more.
Join us every Wednesday as we investigate the sadistic, dark world of serial killers to understand what makes them tick. Learn the signs of these psychopaths who walk among us, because how well do you really know anyone?
If you have any information regarding the case, please contact the BIA at www.bia.gov/BIA/missing-murder-unit.
You can also call their hotline with tips at 1-833-560-2065 and email them directly at ojs_mmu@bia.gov.
And if you want to text them with a tip, text keyword BIAMMU and send your tip to 847-411.
Check the Partners in True Crime website for this and any additional information.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.